Captain Thomas Reed had never quite been prepared for this. The planet Vercaris wasn't on any tourist guide, and certainly it wasn't a place you visited to relax. But as a captain of the Earth Alliance, Reed's job was to explore the unknown, and this planet, with its swirling sandstorms, rocky cliffs, and strange, glowing flora, was very much unknown. What he hadn't expected, however, was her. He'd heard rumors. The Vercarian people were known for their strength and fierce pride, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of meeting Urika. Reed had been standing near a training ground, surveying his team as they unloaded gear from their shuttle, when the sound of clashing swords caught his attention. He turned, expecting to see a couple of soldiers sparring. Instead, his gaze fell on Urika. The tall, green-skinned alien was effortlessly slicing through the air with twin blades, her movements so fluid and precise they seemed almost unnatural. Every strike was powerful, yet graceful, the glint of her silver tattoos shimmering on her skin as they caught the light of the twin suns. The wind caught her long black hair, sending it into a wild dance behind her. She was the embodiment of strength, beauty, and something else, something wild that Reed couldn't quite place. As she brought both blades down in a swift, flawless motion, knocking her opponent to the ground, Reed couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and something else, something he wasn't ready to admit. "Impressive," he said, walking over trying to sound casual, though his heart was beating a little faster than normal. Urika turned toward him, her eyes narrowing in an instant, her posture tense. She had a look in her eyes that made Reed pause. Those eyes were the color of a storm brewing, fierce and intense. "You are the human captain," she said, her voice low and commanding, yet there was something almost playful in it. "I've heard of you. Think you can handle yourself in a fight?" Reed straightened, meeting her gaze. "I've survived worse. Maybe we could find out." He had meant it as a joke, but Urika's lips twitched into the faintest of smiles, and before Reed knew it, she was stepping forward, her blades raised in a challenge. For a second, Reed wondered if he'd really just challenged an alien warrior to a duel. But he was already grinning, his competitive spirit taking over. "All right if you insist," he said, stepping into a fighting stance. The next few seconds were a blur of motion. Urika moved like a whirlwind, her blades flashing in the light, so fast that Reed could hardly keep up. But that didn't stop him. He dodged, weaved, and tried his best to land a few light taps, even as Urika danced around him with that confident, effortless grace. It wasn't that he was bad. Reed was no stranger to hand-to-hand combat or close-quarters fighting, but she was something else entirely. And then it happened. Urika swung one of her blades, aiming for Reed's chest, and he ducked just in time. But in doing so, he lost his balance and stumbled backward, nearly falling. Before he could catch himself, Urika was there, catching him by the arm to steady him. She held him for a beat longer than necessary, her grip firm and steady. "Well, well, human," she teased, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "You are quick, but you are not as quick as me." Reed chuckled, a little out of breath. "I'm not done yet. You'll have to try harder than that." For a moment their gazes locked. Something passed between them, something beyond the playful banter, something raw and unspoken. But before Reed could say anything more, Urika pulled away, her expression shifting back to its usual sternness. "Next time," she said, her voice cool, "you may want to think twice before challenging a Vercarian warrior." Reed grinned, brushing a hand through his hair. "I'll take my chances." Urika's lips quirked upward, her smile almost imperceptible. "You humans," she muttered, shaking her head. "Always so confident. It is charming." The word charming echoed in Reed's mind long after she walked away, her warrior's gait powerful and sure. He found himself standing there, rooted to the spot for a moment longer than he probably should have. What was it about her? He shook his head, trying to focus. He met plenty of aliens before, but there was something about Urika, something that made him want to prove himself, something that made him feel alive in a way he hadn't expected. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Captain Reed, are you going to keep standing there, or are you going to join the rest of us?" It was Lieutenant Riley, one of his crew members, snapping him out of his daze. Reed shot her a quick grin, but as he turned to walk back to the group, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder one more time. Ulrika was already walking away, her confidence radiating like the heat from the desert sun. But this time, Reed didn't just watch her, he felt something stir inside him, something deeper than just admiration. As the wind howled around him and the rest of the crew set up camp, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that his adventure on Vercaris was only just beginning. And somehow, he knew that Ulrika would be a part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. The following morning, Reed couldn't shake the memory of Ulrika, her strength, her smile, the rare one that almost slipped out after their sparring match. It was unlike anything he had seen in any of the other aliens they'd met on Vercaris, and he'd seen a lot, but she was different. There was a fire in her, something wild and untamable. He kept telling himself he'd never get involved with someone like her, especially an alien warrior who could snap him in half without breaking a sweat. But that didn't stop his thoughts from wandering back to her, again and again. As the crew began preparing for their next trek, Reed found himself walking toward the base camp's equipment racks, where most of the team was unloading supplies. That was when he spotted her again. Ulrika was standing by the training grounds, adjusting the armor that covered her broad shoulders. Her tall frame looked even more imposing now, her armor gleaming in the early morning light. She tugged at the straps, clearly frustrated. Reed paused, watching her for a moment. He couldn't help but notice how focused she was, how she rarely showed any sign of weakness, even when she clearly wasn't getting the armor right. "Need some help with that," Reed called out, his voice teasing though he tried to sound casual. Ulrika froze mid-motion, her eyes narrowing in that familiar way. She turned, meeting his gaze. "Do I look like I need help, human?" Reed couldn't help but grin. "I don't know, you look like you're struggling with that chest plate, but maybe I'm wrong." She shot him a sharp look, the kind of look that could have melted steel. "I do not struggle," she said, her tone as cold as her stare. Reed raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, no need to get defensive." Ulrika, however, didn't let up. "I will be fine. This is my armor, not yours." "I've got experience with armor," Reed said, stepping closer, his grin widening. "Trust me, this is a lot easier than it looks." "Easier for you to say, human. You do not understand Vercarian armor." Ulrika's voice held a faint edge of challenge, but Reed could sense something else beneath it, a flicker of vulnerability. Maybe it was just his imagination, but he could see the slightest crease in her brow. Reed couldn't resist. He took another step closer, closer enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her. "Look, I don't mind giving it a shot. Let me help you. You're obviously having trouble with it. No shame in that." His eyes softened just a touch, catching hers with a gentle warmth. For a moment, Ulrika didn't say anything. Her expression was unreadable, and Reed could feel his heart beat a little faster. Had he overstepped? Was she about to knock him across the camp for suggesting she needed help? Then, surprisingly, she sighed. It was low and almost resigned. "Fine," she muttered. "Help me, but only because I cannot seem to get this damn thing on correctly." Reed's grin spread wider. "I knew you'd come around." He stepped forward, his hands reaching for the straps that held her chest plate in place. Ulrika tensed slightly, but she didn't move away. There was a quiet moment as Reed worked to adjust the armor, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin as he tightened the straps. She was taller than him, her muscles firm beneath her armor, and there was a warmth to her that Reed couldn't quite explain. Despite how hard and fierce she appeared, there was something softer underneath. "Thank you," Ulrika said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Reed stopped for a moment, looking up at her. She was still standing so tall, so strong, but there was a hint of something else in her eyes now, Something unexpected. "Any time," he replied, his voice softer than usual. They stood there, locked in a moment of understanding. Reed adjusted the final strap, then stepped back, brushing his hands off. "There, all set. You can thank me later." Ulrika turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his for a moment before she spoke again. "You know, I didn't think you were the type to help an alien warrior like me." There was a flicker of something, amusement, in her gaze. Reed raised an eyebrow. "What, you think all humans are just out to conquer and leave? Not all of us are like that, you know." Ulrika's lips quirked up slightly. "Perhaps you are different, I will give you that." Reed felt a surge of warmth in his chest, but he quickly pushed it away. "I'm just trying to make this partnership work. You know, teamwork and all that." Her eyes softened for a brief second, and for the first time since they'd met, Reed saw her lower her guard just a little. "You humans," she said, shaking her head as if in disbelief. "You are strange. You offer help, even when you know it's not your place." Reed chuckled, shrugging his shoulders. "Maybe we're not as bad as you think. Besides, we're in this together, right? No point in not helping each other." Ulrika regarded him for a moment, her lips curving into something just shy of a smile. "I suppose you are right." Reed didn't know what to say to that, so he just smiled back at her. The air between them suddenly charged in a way he hadn't expected. Just as the moment stretched longer than either of them was comfortable with, the sound of someone clearing their throat interrupted them. Lieutenant Riley, a fellow officer on the team, appeared at the edge of the training field, her arms crossed and a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well, well, well," Riley said, raising an eyebrow. "Looks like Captain Reed's making himself useful today." Ulrika raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking from Riley to Reed. "I was just getting help with my armor. No need to make it sound like something else." Riley grinned. "Of course. Just remember, Reed, you might have earned a warrior's respect today, but you've still got a lot to prove." Reed turned to Ulrika, a playful smile on his face. "I'll prove it, don't worry." Ulrika rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress the faintest hint of a smile. "We will see, human." As the crew continued preparations, Reed felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He'd done more than just help her with her armor. He'd broken through the wall she'd built around herself just a little. And that was a win in his book. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this partnership than either of them had expected. The sun was beginning to dip low over the horizon, casting long shadows over the rocky landscape of Vercaris. The crew of the Earth Alliance had been working all day, mapping out the terrain and gathering data. The mission was proceeding as planned, but Reed couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the constant hum of energy in the air or the endless stretch of desert ahead. It was her. Ulrika. The warrior who seemed to occupy his thoughts more than he cared to admit. Since the armor incident, they had been working together more closely. Ulrika was still the same fierce, no-nonsense leader, but there were moments when their eyes met, and the weight of their silence was something more. Reed couldn't put his finger on it, but it was there, hanging between them like an unspoken challenge. She still teased him, still got under his skin with that sharp tongue of hers. But there were cracks in the armor, moments when her walls came down, even just a little. And he liked it. He liked it more than he should. He was snapped out of his thoughts by a sudden shout from the perimeter. "Captain Reed," Lieutenant Riley's voice echoed over the comms. "We've got a problem." Reed's heart skipped. "What's happening?" he called back, his fingers already reaching for his blaster. "There's movement out there. Looks like something big," Riley said, urgency in her tone. "We could use your eyes on this." Reed turned to the rest of the team, but his eyes automatically searched for one person. Ulrika. She was already there, standing tall and strong at the edge of their camp, her two swords strapped to her back. When she noticed him looking, she raised an eyebrow. "Do you need me, human?" Reed didn't even have to think about it. "I'll need all hands on deck. You, me, and Riley. Let's move now." Without another word, Ulrika nodded and followed him as they jogged toward the front lines. Reed felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he moved, his mind switching into command mode. But something was different this time. Ulrika was beside him, and for the first time he didn't feel like he was leading her, they were leading together. They reached the perimeter, where Riley was already crouched behind a rock outcrop, scanning the area with her scope. "Riley, what are we looking at?" Reed asked, keeping his voice low. Riley pointed to the distance, her finger tracing a huge, moving shape on the horizon. It was massive, covered in thick scales, moving toward their camp with slow, deliberate steps. "It's a sand ripper," she muttered. "Not sure what's got it this riled up, but if it decides to charge, we're in trouble." Reed's pulse quickened. The sand ripper was one of the deadliest creatures on Vercaris, and they had a reputation for being unpredictable. It was fast, ferocious, and heavily armored, making it nearly impossible to kill. He glanced at Ulrika, who was already adjusting her armor, her expression cold and calculating. "We need to be ready for anything," Reed said, taking his position beside Riley. Ulrika moved swiftly, her two blades coming free from their sheaths with a whisper of steel. She turned to Reed, her eyes locking onto his. "Stay close. Do not get in my way." Reed's lips twitched into a grin. "I think I can manage." With no more time to waste, they waited in tense silence as the massive creature drew closer, its heavy footsteps sending tremors through the ground. The sand ripper was nearly 20 feet long, with thick, scaly skin and claws that could tear through metal. Its eyes glowed a deep, unsettling red, and its wide, gaping maw revealed rows of sharp teeth that could crush bone. Reed's mind raced, weighing their options. They didn't have the firepower to bring it down quickly, and if they weren't careful, it could wipe out their entire team. "On my signal," Reed said, keeping his voice steady. "Riley, you take the shot from the left. Ulrika, you flank from the right. I'll draw its attention." Ulrika's lips curled into a half-smile. "You are playing with fire, human." Reed didn't answer. He just motioned for them to get into position. The sand ripper was close now, too close. "Wait for it," Reed whispered. Then, without warning, the creature charged, its massive claws slamming into the ground with terrifying force. "Now," Reed shouted. He sprinted forward, firing his blaster into the air to grab the creature's attention. The sand ripper roared, its eyes locking onto Reed as it surged toward him, faster than he'd expected. Ulrika was already on the move, her blades flashing as she circled the creature, looking for an opening. Reed fired again, narrowly missing the creature's head as it lunged toward him, its massive jaws snapping. He dove to the side, rolling to his feet just in time to avoid being crushed. "Human, move," Ulrika shouted, her voice tinged with impatience. Reed didn't need to be told twice. He sprang back to his feet, narrowly avoiding the ripper's claws as it swiped at him. Riley fired from the left, hitting the creature's shoulder, but it barely slowed. Then Ulrika was there, her twin blades flashing like streaks of silver light. With a powerful leap, she slammed both blades into the creature's side, drawing a roar of pain from the ripper. The beast staggered, its attention split between Reed, Ulrika, and Riley. "Keep hitting it," Reed shouted. The creature turned toward Ulrika, its mouth opening wide to bite, but Ulrika was faster. With a fierce battle cry, she dove beneath its jaws, slashing at its underbelly with both blades. The sand ripper howled in fury, but this time it was slowing, blood pouring from the wound. Reed took a deep breath, steeling himself for one last move. He ran forward, diving onto the creature's back, using his body weight to push it off balance. It staggered, and with one final, synchronized strike from Ulrika, the sand ripper collapsed. Breathing heavily, Reed stood over the beast, watching its final, ragged breaths. His heart was pounding, and his body was covered in sweat, but there was a rush of triumph in the air. "You did it, human," Ulrika said, her voice softer now, her eyes filled with a rare approval. Reed couldn't help but grin, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "You did most of the work, warrior." Ulrika glanced at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment they just stood there, staring at each other, the dust of the battle settling around them. Then, as if on instinct, Ulrika reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are not so bad after all." Reed's smile grew. "I could say the same about you." The words hung between them, and for the first time since they had met, Reed saw something in her eyes that wasn't just admiration, but something deeper, something real. As the team gathered around to assess the situation, Reed felt something shift between him and Ulrika. The test wasn't just about survival, it was about trust. And for the first time, he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was more than just a mission. And as they stood together, amidst the wreckage of their battle, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The days on Vercaris had grown longer, and the mission was moving toward its conclusion. The team had gathered crucial data, cataloging alien species and surveying the planet's volatile atmosphere. But for Reed, the time spent on the planet had become more than just a professional obligation. It was the moments between him and Ulrika that had begun to overshadow everything else. She was always so focused, so controlled, but there were times when her armor slipped, not literally, but figuratively. In the quiet moments after a mission or while they sat around the campfire at night, Reed saw the cracks, the softer side of her that she kept hidden from everyone else, and he couldn't stop himself from wanting to see more. Today was no different. The sun was low, casting golden hues over the desert landscape as Reed and Ulrika made their way back to the base camp after a long day of exploration. The sand shifted beneath their boots, the wind picking up a little as it swept across the dunes. The rest of the team was ahead, but Reed lagged behind, walking in step with Ulrika. For once, they didn't speak about the mission or strategy. The silence was comfortable, but Reed could feel the tension growing, like the air before a storm. Ulrika's eyes were fixed on the horizon, but Reed could tell her thoughts were elsewhere. He had learned to read her moods, or at least, he thought he had. There were times when she was all business, her gaze intense and cold, but other times, like now, there was something more, something that softened her features, made her look almost uncertain. "You're quiet," Reed said, breaking the silence. "That's not like you." Ulrika glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" Reed asked, his voice teasing. He could never resist a challenge. Her lips curled into a faint half-smile. "About how you humans are always so unpredictable." "Is that a bad thing?" he shot back, his grin widening. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stopped walking and turned to face him. There was a strange intensity in her gaze that Reed hadn't seen before. "You're not like the others. I don't understand you, human. You don't just do what's expected. You don't follow the rules." Reed felt a flicker of confusion in his chest. "Is that a problem?" Ulrika shook her head, but her eyes softened just a touch. "No, but it makes you harder to figure out. I thought all humans were the same, proud, arrogant, following orders. But you," she trailed off, her gaze drifting again to the horizon. Reed's heart skipped a beat. There it was again, that unspoken connection between them. "I'm just me, Ulrika, no more, no less. And if that's hard to figure out, well, maybe it's because we're all more complicated than we seem." She didn't answer right away, and for a moment the world around them felt impossibly quiet. The wind had died down, and the only sound was the soft crunch of sand beneath their boots. Reed stepped closer to her, suddenly feeling the urge to close the distance between them, to make her understand something that was bubbling inside him, something he wasn't sure he had the words for. He reached out, lightly touching her arm. It was a simple gesture, but it made Ulrika freeze. Her muscles tensed under his touch, and for a second, Reed thought he had crossed a line. But then she turned toward him, her green eyes locking with his. "Why do you do that?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do what?" Reed asked, his heart pounding now. He knew he was walking a fine line, but he couldn't stop himself. "You make me feel," she faltered, her words caught in some invisible snare. Ulrika's voice was almost lost to the wind. "You make me feel like I don't know, like I'm not in control." Reed's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her that she didn't need to be in control all the time. He wanted to say that it was okay to be vulnerable, to let down those walls she had built so high. But he didn't know if she was ready for that. So instead, he just nodded. "I'm not trying to make you feel anything. I'm just trying to keep up." His voice was softer than he intended, and he almost regretted it. But then he saw the way her eyes flickered, the smallest crack in her tough exterior. For a moment, Ulrika said nothing. She just stared at him, her gaze searching, almost as if she was trying to find the answers to questions she hadn't even asked. The air between them thickened, and Reed could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. Finally she spoke. "I don't trust easily, Reed, but somehow I trust you." The words hit Reed like a punch to the chest. There it was again, that softness, that opening. It was enough to make his pulse race, enough to make him want to say something, do something that might make this moment last forever. But before he could respond, a sharp sound interrupted them, the crackle of the comms coming to life. "Captain Reed, we've got incoming," Lieutenant Riley's voice echoed in his ear. Reed cursed under his breath, feeling the moment between him and Ulrika slip away. He took one last look at her, hoping she knew what he meant, hoping she understood that something had shifted between them, even if they couldn't say it out loud. "I'll be right there," Reed said, turning away and tapping his earpiece. Ulrika watched him go, her face carefully blank once more. But Reed could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twitched as if she were holding something back. As he ran toward the camp to deal with the new threat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened between them, and that whatever came next, it would change everything. But for now, there were bigger problems to face. As Reed disappeared into the distance, Ulrika stood alone on the dunes, watching him go. She didn't know what she felt, only that it was something she wasn't ready for, something that both frightened and excited her. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let go, but only time would tell. The night had fallen quickly over the alien desert, blanketing everything in a thick, quiet darkness. The air was cool now, a relief from the scorching heat of the day. Reed sat by the fire, absently poking at the logs as he stared into the flames. His mind kept drifting back to earlier, to that moment with Ulrika. She had trusted him. She had trusted him. The words kept echoing in his mind as though he couldn't quite believe it. Ulrika, the fierce warrior who never let her guard down, had let him in, even just a little. But what did it mean? Reed wasn't sure, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something between them was changing, something important. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden shout from the perimeter. "Captain, we've got company." Reed sprang to his feet, his pulse spiking with adrenaline. It was Riley's voice, but the urgency in her tone sent a chill through him. He wasted no time, grabbing his blaster and rushing toward the commotion. Ulrika was already there, her posture as rigid and powerful as ever. She stood at the edge of the camp, her hand resting on the hilt of one of her blades, scanning the dark horizon. The others were gathered around her, tense and ready. "What's going on?" Reed asked, stepping up beside her. Ulrika didn't turn, her gaze still fixed on the distance. Scanners picked up movement, large, multiple signatures. "It's not just one creature, it's a pack." Reed's stomach tightened. The last thing they needed was a hostile alien pack descending on their position. He could see the way Ulrika's stance shifted, her muscles coiling in preparation. She was ready for a fight, but Reed knew that even she would be outnumbered if they didn't act fast. "Riley status," Reed called out. Riley's face was grim as she looked up from her scanner. "They're getting closer, too fast. We might not have time to fall back." Ulrika's voice was low, but the command in it was undeniable. "We hold our ground, prepare for battle." Reed's heart pounded. He had no choice but to agree. Weapons ready, everyone, stick together. As the others scrambled to prepare their gear, Reed found himself standing beside Ulrika once again. This time, there was no teasing, no easy camaraderie. Just the two of them preparing for the unknown. The connection that had been slowly growing between them seemed to deepen in the silence that followed. "You've been in situations like this before," Reed said, his voice steady but not without a trace of unease. Ulrika gave him a side glance, her lips curling into a tight, almost amused smile. "I have. I've also survived them." She turned to him fully now, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made Reed feel like his whole world had narrowed down to just her. "I will not let anything happen to you, Reed." His chest tightened at the sincerity in her voice. For a moment, he wanted to say something back, something meaningful, but the sound of distant growls snapped him out of his thoughts. "Get ready," Riley shouted, raising her weapon as the first shapes emerged from the dark. Reed's heart skipped a beat when he saw them. Alien creatures, tall and covered in thick, dark fur with eyes that glowed a menacing red. Their claws were sharp, their teeth jagged, and they were fast, far faster than anything Reed had expected. "We're surrounded," Riley called, a hint of panic creeping into her voice. "Stay calm," Ulrika barked, her hand going to one of her blades. "We hold them off until we can make a plan." The first creature lunged at them, but Ulrika was quicker. She moved with lightning speed, her blade flashing through the air as she slashed the creature across the chest. It howled in pain, stumbling backward, but there were more, always more. Reed wasn't one to sit back and watch. He dove into the fray, firing his blaster at the nearest creature. The shot grazed its shoulder and it howled, but it didn't stop. He backed up toward the others, adrenaline kicking in. "Keep them at bay," Ulrika shouted as she struck down another creature with a clean swipe of her blade. Reed was firing nonstop, but there were too many of them. The creatures kept coming, closing in on their position. He could feel the weight of the situation settling in. This was bad, really bad. Ulrika, always the tactician, seemed to be reading the situation just as quickly. "Riley, on my signal, fire at the ground, we need to cause a distraction," she ordered. Riley nodded, quickly moving to comply. The pack of creatures surged forward again, but before they could get too close, Ulrika made her move. With a powerful roar, she charged, her blade cutting through the air. Reed followed, heart racing, his blaster firing in a rapid rhythm as he aimed for the nearest creature. "Now, Riley," Ulrika shouted. Riley pulled the trigger. A single shot hit the ground, and the ground around them erupted in a cloud of dust and rock, sending the creatures into disarray. Reed didn't hesitate. With the creatures momentarily distracted, he grabbed Ulrika's arm, pulling her toward a narrow ravine in the terrain that he'd noticed earlier. They needed higher ground, better positioning. Ulrika didn't protest. She let him lead her through the chaos, her steps swift and sure, just like always. But this time, there was something different in the way she moved, an unspoken trust, something Reed had only dreamed of a few days ago. They reached the ravine just as the creatures regrouped, snarling and circling them. Reed and Ulrika were backed against the rocks now, but they weren't alone. The rest of the team had followed, weapons raised and ready. "This is it," Reed said, a grin tugging at his lips despite the chaos around them. "We've got this." Ulrika shot him a glance, her lips curling into a smile, the same smile that had been rare but not impossible. "I think you're right." With that, they made their stand. The creatures closed in, but Reed didn't feel fear. Not with Ulrika by his side, not with this team. They were stronger together. "Let's finish this," Ulrika said, her voice fierce. And with that, they moved as one, prepared to face whatever came next. For Reed, there was no question, no doubt. With Ulrika beside him, nothing was impossible. The aftermath of the battle was a blur of adrenaline and relief. The pack of alien creatures had been driven off barely. Their teeth were sharp, and their claws had nearly cut through Reed's armor, but they had held their ground, together, and that was all that mattered. As the dust settled, the team began checking their gear, making sure no one was seriously injured. Ulrika stood a few steps away, her back straight, her blades already sheathed. She looked like she was calculating something in her mind, but Reed saw the subtle tension in her shoulders. Even after the fight, she still carried herself like a warrior, like she couldn't let her guard down. Reed, still catching his breath, moved toward her. His eyes lingered on her for a moment before he spoke. That was close. Ulrika turned, her gaze sharp, but there was something in her eyes that made Reed's heart beat faster. It was a look of something unspoken, something deep, that felt different than before. "We've faced worse," she said, her voice steady. But there was an edge to it, something raw, something vulnerable that she didn't usually let through. Reed nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this conversation, was different. "Yeah," he said softly, but this time it felt different. Ulrika met his eyes, and for a moment neither of them said anything. The air between them felt thick, charged with an unspoken weight. Reed could feel his heart racing again, but this time it wasn't just from the fight. It was from the way she was looking at him, like she was searching for something, or maybe even waiting for something. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "You've been different too, Ulrika, I've noticed." Her expression flickered, and for a split second, Reed thought he might have said the wrong thing. But then she sighed, a sound that was almost like a release, a soft exhale of the tension she had been carrying around. "You've changed too," she said quietly, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "In a way that I didn't expect." Reed wasn't sure how to respond, so he simply took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of the creatures or the dangers of the mission, but of the tension that had been building between them ever since that first moment she had caught him off guard with that playful remark after the sparring match. "What do you mean?" Reed asked, his voice barely above a whisper now. Ulrika's lips parted, as though she was about to say something, but she hesitated. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, Reed saw her truly vulnerable. Not the hardened warrior, not the leader of their team, but just her, someone who carried so much more inside than she let on. You make me feel things I don't understand," Ulrika admitted, her voice a little rough, almost like the words were difficult for her to say. "You make me doubt everything I thought I knew about humans, about me." Reed's heart skipped. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was something deeper, something real. He stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching out toward her. The distance between them was barely there now, the weight of their unspoken connection making it impossible to ignore. "You don't have to understand it," Reed said gently. "Sometimes things just happen, people just happen." Ulrika looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment before she finally spoke. "And if this is a mistake, what if we're not meant to feel this way?" Reed's heart thudded in his chest. The question hung between them, but it wasn't one he could easily answer. Instead of trying to explain it away, he simply took another step closer, closing the space between them completely. His hand gently brushed against her arm, and this time, Ulrika didn't pull away. "I don't think it's a mistake," Reed said, his voice steady, even though his heart was racing. I think it's exactly what's supposed to happen." Ulrika's eyes softened, and for the first time she looked truly uncertain. "I've never let anyone get this close, Reed. I'm not sure how to do this." "You don't have to figure it out all at once," Reed said, his tone warm. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure it out together." Ulrika exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing, her usual hard edge slipping away for the first time since they'd met. She looked at him with something in her eyes that Reed hadn't seen before: trust. And then, without warning, she reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek. Her touch was soft but sure, like she was testing the waters. Reed felt the warmth of her skin against his, the tenderness in the gesture that made his breath catch in his throat. "Maybe," she whispered, her voice quiet, almost tentative. "Maybe I'm ready to try." Reed's heart soared at her words. He didn't even think, he just leaned in, his lips brushing against hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if they were both still trying to figure out what it meant. But then it deepened, the connection between them intensifying with every second. When they finally pulled away, their foreheads touched, both of them breathing heavily. "We're in this together," Reed said softly, his voice a promise. Ulrika didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes said everything. She didn't need to explain. Neither of them did. They were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were something else entirely. And in that moment, Reed realized that the adventure wasn't just about surviving the dangers of Vercaris. It was about what he had found with her. And whatever came next, whatever challenges they would face, he knew one thing for sure. They would face it together. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty, but in the best way possible. The mission on Vercaris was nearing its end. The team had completed the most crucial tasks, cataloging the dangerous species, securing valuable data, and preparing to return to the Alliance's base. But for Reed, the mission had become something entirely different. Every moment with Ulrika had become a revelation. The woman who had once seemed unapproachable, hardened by a lifetime of battle, had slowly, almost imperceptibly, let down her walls, and Reed found himself standing on the edge of something bigger than he ever expected, something real. He found himself waking up every morning not just excited to see her, but grateful. Grateful that in the chaos of alien worlds, there was a quiet moment between them where all that mattered was the look in her eyes. The way she smiled, even if it was brief, or the way her hand brushed against his when they worked side by side. But it wasn't just the small gestures. It was the conversations, the unspoken understanding that had passed between them, the trust they'd built. Each day, Reed was more certain of one thing. Ulrika had become a part of him in a way he couldn't fully explain. It was early morning when Reed found himself walking toward the camp's edge, where Ulrika stood, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The desert was still, the only sound the soft breeze stirring the sand at her feet. She was so beautiful in that moment, standing there alone, her figure illuminated by the soft golden light. As he approached, Ulrika turned, her gaze locking onto his almost immediately. She didn't smile, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that made Reed's heart beat a little faster. "You're up early," Reed said, his voice teasing. Ulrika's lips curled slightly, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You know me. I don't need much sleep." Reed chuckled, moving closer to her. "You never stop, do you?" She shook her head, her expression serious. "I can't afford to. I have too much at stake." Reed's gaze softened. "I know, I've seen how hard you work, how much you carry even when you don't show it." For a moment, Ulrika didn't respond. She just looked at him as if searching for something in his eyes. Then, without warning, she stepped forward, her hand reaching for his. Reed's breath caught in his chest as her fingers curled around his, the simple contact sending a spark of warmth through him. "I've never needed anyone," Ulrika said quietly, her voice soft, vulnerable in a way Reed had never heard before. "I've always done everything alone, but now I'm not so sure." Reed felt his heart swell at her words, his hand tightening around hers. "You don't have to be alone anymore, Ulrika. I'm right here. I'll always be here." She glanced down at their joined hands, the weight of his words sinking in. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet his, and for the first time she didn't look like a warrior. She didn't look like the fierce, untouchable alien who had once stood with her arms crossed and eyes full of challenge. She looked human. A little unsure but open, vulnerable even. "Maybe I've been wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's okay to need someone, to trust them, to care." Reed stepped closer, his chest nearly brushing against hers. His heart was in his throat now, every muscle in his body screaming to close the gap between them. He reached up, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing across her smooth skin. "You don't need to be strong all the time, Erica," he said softly, his voice tender. "It's okay to let go sometimes. It's okay to feel, to lean on someone who cares about you." Her eyes searched his, and for a long moment neither of them said anything. The world around them seemed to fade into the background. The only thing that mattered was the quiet, steady beat of their hearts, synchronized in the silence. Then Erica exhaled, her breath shaky. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice low. "I'm afraid of what happens next. What if I'm too much? What if I'm not enough?" Reed shook his head, his hand still on her cheek. "You're more than enough, Erica, and you're not too much. You're perfect just as you are, and I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes for a moment, a soft breath escaping her lips. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said quietly, her voice almost in awe. "But with you, I feel like maybe it's okay to hope for something more, to believe that maybe we could have something real." Reed's heart soared. He leaned in, his lips brushing softly against hers, a kiss that was gentle, filled with the weight of everything they had shared, the battles, the trust, the quiet moments. This kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't driven by desperation or fear. It was a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Reed rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with hers in the cool morning air. "I never thought I'd find this," Reed whispered, his hand still gently resting on her back. "But now that I've found you, I know I'll never let you go." Erica's smile was small, but it was enough to say everything that had been left unspoken between them. "I think I'm ready for whatever comes next," she said softly. "Together." Reed smiled back at her, his chest swelling with affection and pride. "Together." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's presence, the rising sun bathed them in its golden light, symbolizing the beginning of something new. They weren't just survivors of a dangerous world anymore. They were two people, bound by trust, understanding, and love. And whatever came next, whatever challenges or trials awaited them, they would face it together. And in that moment, Reed knew one thing with absolute certainty. The future had never looked brighter.